Nuclear explosions are caused by weapons such as H-bombs or atom bombs. They are like ordinary explosions, only many times more powerful. These are the two dangers. First, heat and blast, which is followed by fallout. The heat and blast is so severe that it can kill and can destroy buildings for up to 5 miles from the explosion. Fallout is dust that is sucked up from the ground by the explosion. It can be deadly dangerous. It rises high in the air and can be carried by winds for hundreds of miles before falling to the ground. You can protect yourself and your family.
Morning, Drew.
Morning.
Again.
Third time.
Yes, absolutely. So today we're doing a little bit about post World War II. So we're doing the Cold War stuff, and we thought we'd have a look at the preparations that they made post 1945 for Armageddon, really. So against the USSR, the Russian threat and stuff like that. So we're at Littleport again, just on the outskirts of Littleport. And we're going to have a look at Royal Observer Corps bunker. It's a bit of a hidden thing, really, in the country, where the Royal Observer Corps was formed in 1925. Originally, there'd been volunteers spotting Zeppelins in the First World War. Then, up to the Second World War, they started to form more professionally under RAF command, and then during the Battle of Britain, they were key for the whole kind of air defence of the country, and they carried on. They were stood down briefly in 1945 after the Second World War, and then reactivated in 1947 as a civil defence in case of nuclear war. And the government really believed there was a threat, a bit like in the Second World War, when we've talked about bunkers and the preparation for invasion. They believed that there was a real threat of a nuclear attack, and so the government invested in 1,560 standard bunkers across the country, and we're looking at one just over here in front of us, located on the outskirts of Littleport. There was one of these within 8 miles of each other. And each of those 1,500 were divided into small nodal groups of maybe 5 or 8 stations, or posts as they were called, led by a lead and observer, probably 5 or 6 other volunteers on the kind of observer post roster. And then those all connected into a control station. There was a big underground bunker at Norwich. There was another one at Bedford. They were all over the country. And the whole idea of them was to plot nuclear bursts, plan civil defence, look at where the radiation was falling, where they needed to deploy troops, or where the emergency services. So we're looking at this one. They've all fallen into disrepair. This one we can still get into. The reason I know a bit about it is I was in the Royal Observer Corps, not spotting Zeppelins before you say it, but I was in the Royal Observer Corps because they took 16 to 65s, and just before I joined the army, I was in the Royal Observer Corps for about a year. You'll probably insert a few of the pictures in, but when we're looking at it, you see these things all over the place. Probably people have seen them. The post I was at was over at Soham, and basically there were 3 main monitoring things that they had. So on this post here, there was a big tin, about this big, 4 pinholes in each side. You lifted the lid off of it, and inside it were 4 photographic plates. And what happened is, if a bomb went off over towards Ely, there'd be a flash, the pinhole camera would recognise it. And what that helped the observers to do was plot where the bomb had gone off. So that was that. So that was kind of 360. The post that we're looking at over here, this one, I think this is the one that mounted the bomb burst strength indicator. So that was basically when a bomb went off, there would be a huge shockwave of energy and sound and wind, and that shockwave would be picked up by that monitor, and that would be, it was kind of, I think it had a kind of an open, if I remember rightly, it had an open slot to it, and it would just register downstairs in the bunker. And the other post that was sticking up, I'm pretty sure, and it was the other thing that was there, was the radioactive indicator. So that would have a reader in the bunker, which would detect the level of radiation in the local atmosphere. This here and here, those were vents, and basically air vents and filters to allow fresh air to come into the people underneath.
So a quick look at that one. I'll find out what there is to see when I get back.
Absolutely. So when we get downstairs, you need to watch your head going down. I've been down it before, and it's quite safe, but we just need to be a bit careful going down. It's about 15 foot down into the bottom of it. Like I said, there'd be 3 people living down there. They'd have cooking facilities. There's a toilet, and the crew area where there'd be a couple of bunk beds. The bunker was for 3 people, like I said, so 2 would be resting or sleeping, and 1 would be on duty.
Right.
It wasn't radios here, it was telephone lines. There would be a telephone line coming from each one, and the power, it was independent of power. There was no water or power here. It was run off a 12-volt battery, and each post had its own portable petrol generator.
Right.
A lot of I can remember the discussions is, if we're in a radioactive atmosphere, you can't run a petrol generator down there, so that means that you have to come out.
Yes.
So big discussions about that at the time. So I've got a fixed lamp for us to take down, so I'm going to climb down now, and then I'll just watch you down.
Okay, I'll see you down there. Wow.
So we're now down in the bunker itself, and as you can see, it's obviously been vandalised, and kids have been playing down here and all the rest of it. So to orientate ourselves, behind us is the entranceway. So this way was where the vent is, and you can see just up in front of you, that's the air vent that would be coming down. Essentially, this was kind of crew quarters. So you've got 2, possibly 3 beds here, which, and these 3 beds, that was crew accommodation. So you can see they're very old, probably 1920s frames by the looks of them, and they would have been in bunk bed style. So one would have fitted onto the top of the other. If we look up, we can see where there's a couple of holes in the roof, where the monitoring equipment would have come through, and this would have been the bomb burst indicator, and that one was the radioactive monitor. I think there was 1 of the 2. So you can see pictures of that. And then this, as I remember here, was the crew area. So we had, there would be a bench here, and this is where the operator who was on duty would be working. There would be a map on the wall which would show the local area, and this was generally the kind of where the work was being done. You can see on the floor here there's a lot of kind of debris and bits and pieces from the time. That's the lid that was on the roof of so you could see there was a handle to pull it down, and then there's a couple of things that would have been controlling the closure of it. So we cook here, and this would be, because we were civil defence, you had all of the old kit. So you literally we had World War I Tommy cookers, which were hexamine cookers were the current stuff. We had World War I Tommy cookers, which were kind of methylated spirits, and we would cook here. This here, do you know what that is?
No.
That's a stirrup pump.
Right.
Because when there would be, underneath this, there's a kind of a sump, and basically we're 15 feet underground here. So the water would ingress into and then maybe come through the roof or whatever. And so this was a stirrup pump, and you'd every now and again pump it up, and then that goes up on that pipe and exits up onto the top. And then in this room, I don't know if you can if you can see it all. That was the toilet. So there was a toilet, but it was also, we stored kit in there. So we had a petrol generator, because there was a 12-volt battery, which I mentioned before. That was stored in there, and the 12-volt battery, of course, would run down. It really had very minimal lighting. It had one 60 watt bulb. There was minimal other requirements, but when that did run down, and every few months we would come in. We train every week, but every few months we'd lift the battery up, and you had to lift it up on a rope. You had to tow it up through there, and then you had to tow up the electric generator, and then you charge the battery. So how you would do that in a nuclear environment, I don't know, but it was. I guess it was. The bottom line was it was kind of time limited stuff.
Well, this was an era of protect and survive. I mean, in fact, that is how that came to be.
Absolutely, and these were a standard build. So there were 1,560 of these around the country, dotted around and plotted in. And then, if you imagine a kind of a spider's web, these would be at the edge of the spider's web, and then you would have control centres going in, filtering this stuff in.
So do you know where the next nearest one is to here?
Well, I know the one I operated from was Soham, but I'd imagine, I've not really looked at a map, but they generally were all within 8 miles of each other. So I would imagine Soham was one. There'd probably be one towards March, maybe Christchurch. They were generally in areas where there was a population, of course, because they needed to keep a crew in there. And it did operate. They ran until the 1990s. So from about 1955 to 1990 they ran. We used to go on training weeks. We'd go up to Norwich, and we'd have training weeks where we'd do exercises and stuff. And the crews, I think they allowed some leeway for not being able to recruit people. So that's why they did 16 to 65. So they extended it all. But also they even allowed the retirement age to go on beyond 65 in case they couldn't get people to replace them. So that's it. There's one piece I'm going to put on the end, which about how people considered they were going to work. And I don't know whether this is just a kind of a bit of a wives' tale or something, but they said, what would happen if a farmer turned up with his shotgun and said, me and my family are coming into your bunker? What would you do? And I don't know whether this is just it was a bit of a bravado or whatever, but they said, well, what we would do is we would put the petrol generator on, and we would put the tube into the bunker, and then we would go back and do our work. So whether that was just a little bit of bravado or whatever, but that was something I remember it very clearly being discussed. But what would you do? That's the question. What would you do if the farmer's there with a shotgun and saying, me and my family are coming to your bunker, and your duty is to actually do do what you're supposed to be doing? Mm-hmm. So a bit Heath Robinson, but again, it's this whole thing of debunking the myth that we weren't prepared, we weren't going to do anything. And a huge investment in the time. You imagine how much it would have cost to build 1,500 of these, and then all of the support structure around it, and then all of the people that were being uniformed, and the rations and fuel, and just huge endeavour.
I'm really surprised the condition it's in, and that's not to say that I was expecting better, I was expecting worse.
Okay. I think it's not like one of the World War II bunkers where you can get into it easy. I think kids do come down here, but I don't think it's as easy as it was.
No.
So all of this stuff that's in here is built probably 1950s, And I would imagine a lot of the equipment that's probably come out of old barrack rooms and stuff like that. You know, so those beds look like, like, you know, they are very old.
Cannot imagine, even for a second. I mean, what duration would you be expected to stay down here?
Well, I suppose it depended a little bit on the rations, and we generally kept, I think there was about 2 weeks worth of rations. Water would have been the big thing, because we had a couple of jerry cans, so water would have been, I think, the big thing. But then if nuclear war started, how long was it really expected for us to be able to survive it? So
what's it going to be like on the surface?
Absolutely.
Are you better off down here? Or?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then there's the whole discussion leaving your family. You know, so you're going off to do your duty and you're coming down here. So for me as a 16-year-old boy, it was just an adventure. But you know, there were men in the ex-servicemen, a lot of them in their 40s and 50s that were doing it. You know, so. And then there was the whole discussion about changing the papers, you know, the bomb burst papers. So, you know, you would necessarily have to climb out into potentially a radioactive environment.
Well, thank you for showing me.
No problem.
Again, it's one of those, as you say, ghosts on the horizon. You come past it as many times as you like and you may not know it's here.
Yeah. Yeah.